So will there be a solution for the Superman building? Well, one international company might provide it.
The Dan Yorke State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
Ted Nesi is here to expand on a story that he and Dan McGowan broke last week for WPRI.com and, of course, Eyewitness News, and that is that the pretty well-known and substantial multi-billion-dollar PayPal organization is sniffing around Rhode Island on the governor's recruitment strategy and could very well be a solution to the Superman building, or their involvement could create a war over the Superman building and end the conversation altogether. We'll talk about that and the ramifications of such as we go. Great to have you in. Thank you for joining me on this Tuesday. Hope your Labor Day weekend was terrific. The rundown, real quick. Now it's an even race. Well, you know what? Sometimes you get a little too confident with your position, and I think the Clinton people have done that. Here's the headline on the latest. CNN states the obvious after their poll. There in ORC poll came out. Of course, that's the statistical deviation, the plus or minus, but he's now no doubt made a gain. Here's the latest.
United States and Mexico share it.
Donald Trump says Mexico's president broke the ground rules when he said the men discussed Trump's proposed wall on the U.S.-Mexican border.
It was discussed that it wouldn't be discussed, but they know my stance.
Trump made a last-minute trip to Mexico last month in what looked like a softening of his hardline stance against illegal immigration. But Hillary Clinton says Trump went to Mexico with a different mission.
It's been the mission of his whole campaign from the very first day to demonize immigrants.
Both candidates will spend much of the remaining 9 weeks of the campaign in the key battleground states that are expected to decide the election. Trump will be in Virginia today, while Clinton heads to Florida. On Monday, she spoke to reporters on her new campaign plane, answering questions about her email scandal for the first time in months.
Everything I did at the State Department, I did in furtherance of America's interests and our security.
Trump also spoke to reporters on his plane and agreed to attend all 3 presidential debates, but said too much preparation could be risky.
I've seen people do so much prep work that when they get out there they can't speak. I've seen that.
The first presidential debate is September 26th.
Yeah, this debate, this September 26th debate is going to be pay-per-view. I mean, they might as well just, somebody ought to buy the rights and maybe I'll put a group together, buy the rights, and charge you $29.95 to be able to watch it, because it's going to be something else. Listen, this race has flipped, and the Clinton campaign, I think, is probably been caught somewhat lengthily flat-footed on this whole thing. I mean, the foundation challenges and the email scandal have finally crept up to the point that folks are coughing up their lack of trust. And Donald Trump, while he has been up and down on the immigration thing and has been play acting the entire way, has been relatively mistake and scandal free, and it was bound to come this way. This race could have a couple of more statistical flip-flops. The key is the Electoral College. When it comes down to the popular vote and that kind of little margin of a nose lead by Donald Trump, and you hear the numbers in case you've missed them. That is no doubt a major gain. And the disappointment I have is that Gary Johnson is not going to be able to get to the 15% nationally, and the debate group that puts this whole stuff together won't let him in. I thought that might have been somewhat of a game changer. Anyway, the Clinton campaign's got to figure out a way to build back her trust, and I don't know if that's doable in a 90-day period of time. Doesn't mean that people won't elect her, though. Keep your eye on the Electoral College notes, because they're more important. Nothing personal. The Philippines leader is more or less expressing his disdain for the American president, suggesting that, hey, we're no longer a colony. Get off our backs. Don't tell us how to handle our drug war, so that we indiscriminately kill people as we go, trying to figure out how to beat that problem down. Headlines and discussions on this on a couple of different levels here, New York Times and then The Guardian. I'm trying to figure out, was it that, or was it the B, or what? Well, here's the latest.
Nobody but nobody.
It was a shocking insult from a U.S. military ally.
You must be respectful.
Speaking in Tagalog, Philippine President Duterte told reporters that he'd call the U.S. president a son of a bitch if questioned about his violent crackdown that has killed more than 2,000 suspected drug dealers since July. When asked to respond, President Obama chose his words carefully.
I have seen some of those colorful statements in the past, and so clearly he's a colorful guy.
But Mr. Obama then swiftly canceled his Tuesday meeting with Mr. Duterte, who is known for those unusually crass comments, including cursing the Pope and using a homophobic slur to describe the U.S. ambassador to the Philippines.
Leadership and diplomacy just, I don't know, it doesn't seem to be in these days. You got to give the president A+ for poise, right? And of course he's not going to meet with this guy when he's spewing out language like this. Believe me, there'll be diplomacy underneath. And of course, he's already today kind of apologized for that reference. And I'm not sure if it's the W word or the B word, but I do find it interesting that we play the story. They can't spell it, but they can say it. So, I don't know. It's a crazy world right now, right? They'll fix that behind the scenes, no doubt. Coming back to home, or actually we're not home yet, this one is intriguing. It's got the entire broadcast industry talking and probably the entire business world. The headline here on the Fox News development with Gretchen Carlson earning a $20 million settlement and the apologies. And I think the combination of the two is really the conversation here. That she got both the money on a very public level and the apology from Fox over what she says was Roger Ailes' regular and sundry behavior. Of course, there were a lot of other women who poured in to support her and say they had their own story of sexual harassment. This is going to, and by the way, Fox having a bad day because, what's her name? Greta, thank you, Ted. Ted's right. Greta bailed today saying that she's at the end of her contract and she doesn't feel like it's been her home for very long. And supposedly there's a money issue there. Somehow money always makes you feel a little bit more at home. But anyway, maybe she's expressing a level of discomfort with the whole place right now, maybe inside and in terms of its own, perception, in terms of its bias. Bottom line here is this is going to rekindle a lot of conversation about sexual harassment in the workplace, not just in media, but throughout the country. And as long as it's handled constructively, that's probably a good thing. All righty, let's come home and find out what's going on. One of the big reasons I've got Ted on today is to talk about a story that he broke last week. Here's the headline. We all said. Here's the shorter narrative.
5 months after the effort began, Rhode Island has emerged as a finalist to land a new PayPal operations center. And multiple people with direct knowledge of the talks tell Eyewitness News PayPal executives are intrigued by the idea of putting hundreds of workers in the long-vacant Superman building in downtown Providence. Documents obtained by Eyewitness News show a PayPal representative recently asked the building's owner to develop a proposal for how he would renovate roughly 60,000 square feet on 9 lower floors for the company to lease. Sources caution, though, that the building is just one option for a Rhode Island office on PayPal's radar, and the company is also still considering a small number of other states for its project. The Superman building has been empty since Bank of America moved out in 2013. The iconic skyscraper is Rhode Island's tallest building. One potential sticking point, the building's owner has said repeatedly it needs tens of millions of dollars in work and says the only way it will happen is if taxpayers cover part of the cost.
Oh. I don't know about that part.
That's why I included it.
Yes. Welcome. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Could be a good bad break, a bad good break. I can't figure out which. Certainly that conversation about the Superman building has been sitting there like a wet noodle with not much going on. A couple of really strange attempts, certainly the last one when they brought some kind of an open house, the ownership did,
tours.
And was not specific about what they might be asking for from government after the previous tab was very specific about what they were asking for from government. What's your overall take about that?
I think the Superman folks, and I think they've even been pretty honest about this, they're struggling with how to navigate this situation in a post-38 Studios environment, right? I think they're like, we have the most iconic building arguably in downtown Providence. It's sitting empty. It's a white elephant. Yes, it's no use to the owner at the moment as it is, but it's also no use to Rhode Island necessarily empty. And I think they just keep throwing things at the wall that they think are most likely to stick, and they keep falling apart. I mean, I think I'd also think about what happened with the Paw Sox last year, where a lot of the people around that deal initially thought it was a done deal. You had powerful people involved, you had the beloved brand, McCoy Stadium and everything, and they thought people would just pony up, and there was just an outcry. And so I think this is I think maybe a little more complicated, because obviously bringing a major company that's not even in Rhode Island right now in and putting them in there, it might seem to be able to give more of an economic spark than a ballpark or something. But I just genuinely don't know, and I suppose without seeing there is no deal yet. And so without seeing any numbers, I think it's really hard to gauge whether this could be something that maybe voters would get behind, having a public-private partnership kind of deal, or if it's just be off the table for a lot of people.
Well, you know what? We'll come back. We'll talk about the governor's role in this, because she started all this, and I mean that in a constructive way, and talk more about what the ramifications of this deal are and more. Stay with us. Don't go anywhere.
You know, I've been talking to PayPal for months. It's premature to say whether they will come and if they do, what building. But several months ago, they announced that they were not going to be going to North Carolina on account of the discriminatory practices there. So I called the CEO and said, how about Rhode Island? But, you know, we're in discussions.
Well, listen, you got to give the governor credit when she extends herself. She saw a story in North Carolina, the controversy with PayPal there and the transgendered bathroom situation, and they just don't want to be involved in building the new operations center. I believe it's going to be in Charlotte or the Charlotte area.
I believe that's correct, yes.
But regardless of where it was going to be, it's not going to be there anymore. She got on the horn and she did a little networking. And
same as much like the GE story.
Yeah.
You know, that's one thing about this governor. She clearly will pick up the phone and quite a few times, according to GE, if she thinks she has a
yeah.
line
So
in
listen, that advocacy is something that you got to support if you're a constituent, one way or the other. That they came sniffing and said, hey, you know, we like this spot. Okay. So there's nothing, you know, wrong with this story. It's all goodwill, good faith, government and business kindling, so to speak. The challenge is going to be whether she will put her, if they say, yeah, we like this spot, and for some reason we've got a vision and we want those 60,000 feet on the bottom of the building, and the landlord says, yeah, we've got another idea for the other use, whether it's another company or whether it's
apartments, a hotel, something like that.
Somebody's going to have to put their political capital on the line, stick their head in the public guillotine and urge it or defend it, or it will never happen.
Mm-hmm. I think
that's going to be an interesting play.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I tend to think, certainly there's no doubt in my mind the governor's staff is well aware of how explosive this whole conversation could be. But I also think they say, wow, we have a Fortune 500 company. You know, few people thought there was any chance any company would even consider going back into the Superman building. So they have this option to try to kickstart something down there. You know, you talk to someone like Joe Paolino, who owns all the buildings around it, and it sort of sucks some of the energy out of the downtown business district to have that huge building empty, decaying, this ugly scaffolding around it. And yet, you can't blame average Rhode Islanders for being hyper skeptical about how much public money needs to be poured into what is in the end a private building. Right. And not to mention, also state leaders have not given people a ton of confidence, granted past state leaders, but in their deal-making abilities, right? If you thought they could drive a hard bargain, people might have more faith, but after 38, I think people have a lot of skepticism.
Well, you know, it's so funny. I mean, this is something that months after, a year after, 2, 3, 4, 5, I have been saying over and over again, and now you're going to get to the place that will fulfill my prophecy, and that is this: if you didn't really dig down on the 38 Studio story and break it wide open for its ugly political transparency, if not, you know, the potential criminality back when we didn't know if there would be charges, and someone didn't lead and purge and lead and purge and lead and purge and leave some political blood on the floor, and then bring a summary to it and a message of what it was and how it will never happen again because of X and Y. Without the hearings and all of the stuff that you will have this electorate which is lazy to ask for accountability on 38, but which will resent it forever, thus impacting public-private partnerships, which in the modern world happen all over the place.
Well, right. I mean, you know, the Superman people look kind of furiously over at the nursing school, the old power plant, South Street Landing, that's being turned into the state nursing school. A ton of public money is being poured into that development. That's the only reason that's getting done. And yet that one is celebrated and held up. And, you know, and again, and that's going to be a private developer's building when it's done, even though the state will be using it. I think it's a very tough conversation because It really does. I guess a lot of it comes down to the fact that how much is the Superman building public, right? How much is the need to have something happening there a public need? Beyond, of course, it's a private sector entity. Of course, the owner is a private businessman. But how much is there a responsibility of the state, of taxpayers, or desire to make something happen there? Or what else are we going to do? Do we want to knock it down? Is it just that this owner needs to sell it to someone else so that we're starting fresh? I think right now, as you said at the beginning, it's just in a holding pattern. Everyone's taken their ball and gone home, and the thing just sits there decaying, and it's kind of a sad metaphor.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. It would take a lot. It would take, I think, first and foremost, a decent deal that is defensible, and then political leaders willing to actually defend that deal.
But the defensible will be the sticky wicket. What is defensible? Yeah. Right now, there's a feeling amongst the electorate, some of whom are thinkers, some of whom aren't thinkers. Mm-hmm. That any crossover between private ownership and public finance is a bad thing.
And your point,
and that's something that you're going to have to go to political war on. And if this governor and this speaker get in line together, and they're not, in general, perhaps they can make the arguments. But you know what? They cooked their own goose by slow playing the 38 Studios recovery.
That's what I wanted to. I think you're just so right about the political. Look, they say they made that political choice not to have a real, full, thorough, like Bruce Sunderland did after the credit unions because it would be a distraction or whatever. Fine, but this is the other side of that decision, which is it's a drip, drip, drip. There's still a feeling we could learn new things about 38 Studios, at least as recently as last September with those court docs we did. It reminds me a little of the Hillary Clinton email thing. If Hillary Clinton a year ago had the fact that we're still learning new things about a story that's been going on so long, that's what creates so much damage. Also the feeling that no one's been straight with us as voters, and that kind of thing is what keeps creating damage here. But it's getting pretty late in the game for them to try to change that.
Well, speaking of 38, there's some developments even as we speak today. We'll talk about that when we come back. Stay with us. Boy, that's old video, man. Gosh, we've seen a lot of Kurt Schilling coming out of that building. It dawns on me as you and I are even talking, Ted, during the break about how 38 Studios has kind of poisoned potential projects like whatever could come together on the Superman building. We deserve as taxpayers the right to be able to evaluate whatever private-public partnerships, the Superman building, PayPal, whatever is out there on their own merits. And right now, there's just kind of this built-in psychological bias. Mm-hmm. Even now, this governor, maybe it will get through her politically thick head, and the speaker himself, when they see the kind of malaise that might surround a potential deal for the Superman building, they then might be able to say, you know what, okay, the $1 million savings the governor has in store by not doing the hearings may not be so prudent anymore. Maybe she finally says, now we do need a final thing, because trust me, I want all the answers, I want to make it transparent, even though it's late, so that you have confidence for new things like the Superman project with PayPal. She may have to dig in and do those things simultaneously. I don't know if she's
I've
got
seen.
the
I don't.
chutzpah to
I'm not
do
saying
so.
your analysis is wrong. I've just seen zero
No evidence
of a change of thinking
But will
at
the
all.
light go on? And if they're listening to the show and saying, you know what, they've been saying it, Nesi's been on this story all the time, Yorke's been saying it's going to bleed into other projects, and finally it might get through their head that we just can't get anywhere. Anyway, speaking of 38, the judge on the case ratified the retired judge's negotiation on Barclays and
Wells Fargo.
And Wells Fargo. So the two financiers that put the deal together have now settled for their $20-some-odd million package. Next step is an actual trial date.
Mid-October. I mean,
you think we'll get there? First Southwest seems to be digging its heels in, saying they don't want to settle, they want to try. I don't know. Schilling wants to tell his story, but
he says that his lawyer might disagree on whether that's worth the risk of a jury going against you. So we'll see. I mean, they keep saying they're still negotiating with the other defendants, Schilling and the other executives from 38. I guess right now we are getting close enough. It's starting to seem like there could actually be a trial, right? But the closer we get, maybe also that more the heat on both sides rises on, all right, let's just settle this thing. Let's get this out of the way. But right now we're on track to sit down with a jury October 15th, start picking jurors. It'll be interesting to see who they can find as a jury pool in Rhode Island at this point without opinions on 38
Should it settle, and I think it will. My guess is that we will never see a trial. Yeah. Should it settle, that's when the governor might have an interval to be able to step in and say, okay, now we want to write the epilogue.
Yeah, at that point you'd have civil suits over if everything's settled.
Right. The SEC thing is hanging out there.
SEC is its own thing, but a little different. Though I guess that is another way it can keep popping into the headlines. I mean, I don't know. And I think people. I mean, I listen to your show, Dan. People seem exhausted by 38 Studios. You say you're like, I know you're all mad about it, but you're not calling.
Right.
You know, and
no,
I think that's
what's there left to say.
Right. Right.
Other than the lingering psychological cloud that now will ring phones when you say, all right, 38's over. Hey, what do you think about the Superman? Not my taxpayer money, you know, and they pay. So, you know, it's the same thing.
To say, maybe it's the best thing Don Kucheri ever did for conservatives because it's really made it hard for state government to do anything particularly active. I know that wasn't his intention, but...
speaking of conservatives, liberals, and the thing in the middle, libertarians. This is interesting. Got a headline here. Ted's done some work on the politics of the presidential race. The 15% number for Gary Johnson is what he needs nationally. I saw these numbers too today. He polls well here, maybe because they've got at least a vocal organization on it, and we've been talking about him a lot, and I'm sure others have too. But he's not going to make it nationally.
Well, I don't think he's not near that 15 that the threshold the debate folks set. So I think not being in the debate is really tough. On the other hand, I think, sometimes I look at this presidential race reminds me a bit of our 2014 governor's race, which was Raimondo Fung and then Healy. And, those two parties were pretty divided at the end. Fung, after the Fung block race, left some toxicity that we're still seeing play out. Raimondo obviously had huge issues on the left and with unions and stuff. And then that helped to push up that Healy number a lot higher than a lot of us expected, into the 20% range when he was done. So maybe because these two nominees are both so damaged with so many voters, he has more of a ceiling. And here in Rhode Island, too, I mean, we went, don't forget, 23% for Ross Perot in 1992. And then we had Bob Healy just 2 years ago get a lot more than people thought. So there is, people here I think are more willing maybe than in some states to go in a third direction, unlike the two big parties.
Even with a reputation of being completely blue.
Well, exactly.
Which is weird.
Well, the funny thing people forget is, you're blue because in the end, Sheldon Whitehouse, Jack Reed, Hillary Clinton get one more vote than the Republicans. That doesn't mean every person here is out marching with Elizabeth Warren, right? The blue can almost obscure how different even. You look at things like how I wrote a story last week on how many pro-life Democratic lawmakers we still have in the General Assembly, where they're gone nationally. But politics is so much more complex. That's what makes it interesting than just the final outcome in the Electoral College of a presidential race.
Yeah. Well, you had a good debate on Newsmakers with the majority leader. I don't know, Kev, you got time for that B-roll. That was something. When you dig down into these races, John D. Simone and his challenger right there, an educator from Providence for
Marcia
some 15
Ranglin
years.
Vassell, and there he is, John D. Simone. Yeah.
Boy, was he classic. Yeah, go online and watch that one at WPRI.com. If that's not old line politics,
she's a clear progressive newcomer, and he is clearly a sort of old school.
You never knocked on my door. Yeah, but I knocked on this guy's door, and this guy's door, and this guy's door.
A lot of Italian surnames in that name.
Yeah, you said it. I did. Can't talk about that anymore.
Right.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. When we come back, final word. Stay with us.
Collaborate and listen. The Knights are back with a brand new and ancient data. Shows that we're improving. There's Mr. Worth with his fanny pack moving. Will it ever stop? Yo, I don't know. Rocking black and gold, Central High, let's go. To the extreme, we graduate all our seniors. Thanks to the best student staff and teachers.
That's good stuff. That's Central High School celebrating its recent better academic achievement numbers and getting ready for the new school year. It's nice to see that the public schools have the same kind of spirit and energy that some of the private schools, a la Moses Brown's famous video. Good stuff to start the year. Prospects are good for Central. Congratulations to them. Have a good night. Good night.